Imagine waking up to find that the money you thought was safe might not be there at all. Cash machines across the country are suddenly out of service. News anchors are talking about the biggest financial scandal in the country's history. People are lining up outside bank branches, scared that everything they've worked for could vanish overnight. At the center of this panic is not a foreign enemy, not a cyber attack, but one woman. A billionaire businesswoman who never held elected office, never appeared on a ballot, yet quietly gained the power to shake an entire nation's banking system. This is the story of how she did it, and what it reveals about how fragile our trust in banks really is. On paper, she looked like a success story. She started as a small-time trader, then built a real estate empire as the country modernized and cities exploded with new development. Glossy magazines called her the Queen of Property. Politicians praised her as a symbol of growth. She owned hotels, shopping centers, luxury apartments, buildings that defined the new skyline. To the public, she was a self-made billionaire helping to reshape the country. But behind the scenes, she wanted something far more powerful than just buildings. She wanted control over the one thing that fuels every modern empire, a bank. The bank she targeted wasn't just any bank. It was a major institution with branches across the country, billions in deposits, and the trust of ordinary families, small businesses, and local governments. On paper, regulations said one person couldn't simply buy and control a big bank. There were ownership limits, fit and proper checks, layers of oversight that were supposed to stop exactly that, so she didn't take control with her own name. Instead, she allegedly used a web of shell companies and loyal associates. Relatives, employees, and partners became the official shareholders. Companies that appeared independent were, in reality, part of her network. Slowly, quietly, this network bought up shares in the bank. Individually, none of them seemed threatening. Together, they gave her de facto control over the institution, without her name ever looking like it broke the rules. Inside the bank, executives knew who really called the shots. If you wanted a promotion, if you wanted a big loan approved, you learned very quickly that decisions didn't just come from the boardroom, they came from her. Regulators and politicians saw the same thing everyone else saw: a booming bank, a celebrated billionaire, and numbers that seemed to show growth. In systems built on relationships and influence, that was often enough. Once she effectively controlled the bank, the real game began. In a normal bank, loans are supposed to go to a mix of real businesses and people, with checks that make sure they can pay the money back. In her version of banking, loans allegedly became a way to siphon money out of the system. The bank would approve huge loans to companies that looked independent on paper, but were secretly tied to her. These companies often had little real business activity. Their main purpose was to receive bank money. The loan funds would then be moved, layer by layer, into her real estate projects, other investments, or even offshore accounts. On the balance sheet, it all looked fine. The bank appeared to have assets in the form of loans. The borrowers appeared to be companies with property and projects. Interest payments could be shuffled around within her network to give the illusion of performance. In reality, it was like drilling a hidden tunnel from the bank's vault into her empire. Deposit money, people's savings, business accounts, government funds, was being quietly redirected out of the bank and into her control. And because she effectively controlled both sides, the bank making the loans and the companies receiving them, almost no one inside had the power or the courage to say no. On paper, the bank still looked healthy. In practice, it was becoming a hollow shell filled with bad loans to companies that would never truly pay the money back. Scams like this can run for years, until something breaks. In this case, it wasn't a dramatic confession. It was accounting. As the numbers got bigger and the political climate changed, investigators and regulators started to look more closely at the bank's books. Routine reviews began to raise uncomfortable questions. Why were so many of the largest loans going to a small cluster of related companies? Why were they repeatedly rolled over instead of being repaid? Why did so many of these borrowers seem connected, directly or indirectly, to the same billionaire? One audit became an investigation. The investigation turned into raids, document seizures, and forensic accounting. What they found was staggering. According to official reports, tens of billions of dollars worth of loans, on paper, assets of the bank, were tied to her network and were effectively unrecoverable. The institution that millions of people trusted with their savings had been quietly gutted from the inside. When that reality could no longer be hidden, the news broke. Overnight, the queen of property turned into the alleged architect of the country's biggest financial fraud. The collapse of trust at one major bank doesn't stay neatly contained. When people see that a supposedly well-regulated institution has been hollowed out by one person, they start asking a terrifying question. If it happened there, could it happen to my bank too? Suddenly, it's not just about one institution. Depositors begin moving money, lining up at branches, or simply panicking online. Other banks, even healthy ones, can feel the shock as the entire system trembles. The government is forced to step in. Regulators rush to stabilize the bank, replace management, and figure out how to cover the hole left by years of fraudulent lending. Authorities promise that ordinary depositors will be protected, because if people believe their savings can vanish, the entire economy is at risk. At the center of it all is a high-profile trial. The billionaire who once appeared in glossy magazines now appears in court. Prosecutors lay out spreadsheets, loan documents, ownership charts showing how her network allegedly took control of the bank and drained it. The reported numbers are almost too big to comprehend. Tens of billions misused, a financial shock that will take years for the country to fully absorb. To the public, this isn't just a white-collar crime. It feels like a betrayal of the basic promise that if you put your money in a bank, it will be there when you need it. It's easy to look at a story like this and say, that's one evil person. But to really understand how one scammer can shake an entire country's banks, you have to understand what a bank actually is. A bank is not a vault where your exact money just sits and waits for you. It's more like a machine that constantly takes in deposits and sends money back out as loans, investments, and credit. Your balance is a promise, a claim on the bank's ability to pay you when you ask. That promise only works if a few things stay true. The people running the bank are genuinely constrained by rules and oversight. The loans they make are mostly to real, productive borrowers who can pay them back. Regulators, auditors, and politicians are willing to challenge powerful insiders when something looks wrong. In this scandal, almost all of those safeguards failed. One person used shell companies and influence to quietly capture a bank. Internal controls didn't stop it. Regulators didn't catch it early enough. And by the time the truth surfaced, billions were gone. The lesson isn't just don't trust billionaires. It's that complex systems, like modern banking, often depend on invisible trust. Most of us never read a balance sheet, never track where our bank lends our deposits. We trust that someone else is watching. When that trust is abused, the damage goes far beyond one institution. It shakes people's belief in the entire idea that their money is safe in a bank. It forces governments to spend enormous sums to clean up the mess. And it shows how a single determined person, in the right position, can turn the gears of the financial system into a personal cash machine. In the end, this story is about more than one scammer and one bank. It's about how fragile our financial systems can be when power, secrecy, and weak oversight combine. Because as long as money flows through institutions we don't fully understand, there will always be someone trying to bend those systems in their favor, and hoping no one notices until it's too late.